Hello and welcome to today's episode of Spec Steppin, where we are stepping through the web API spec one letter at a time, basically. Today we're going to be talking about device orientation events. Now, this can be quite involved. So what you're going to see from my demo, just to keep it short, is basically the tip of the iceberg when it comes to making sure these things work, because you have to worry about all the different devices, different device orientation, the animation that might be involved based on what you're moving and things around. And I'll show you that a little bit. So you might have to worry about some CSS, some animation frames, and all that sort of thing. So this is meant to just give you a quick overview introduction to this to show you a little bit of what's possible because this is pretty cool API. So basically, what this does, this API, is it allows you as a developer to get access when they're on a mobile device to the movement of that device. So if they have a device here, let me grab my cell phone. So if they have a device, for example, here, you see my little phone here, and as I'm holding it, I have all sorts of different ways I can manipulate the orientation of that device. So we have the ability to access that, kind of like accessing an accelerometer and things like that. So you have gyroscopes, compasses, accelerometers, all sorts of stuff. And so, like if you're doing some gaming, if you're building a web-based game that you want to access the control with moving the phone around, you can do that. For doing mapping, if you're looking at it and you want to access where they're going by moving that around, so you can access the shake and all that stuff. So, whole bunch of things. Now, just like this note says here, I'm demoing this on my Mac laptop here, which of course is a desktop browser. And I'm going to be using Chrome to do it. Now, if you see my other videos, I actually prefer Brave to Chrome. Personally, it's just my own personal viewpoint. And it is a Chromium-based browser. However, I'm using pure Chrome in this case because the dev tools that have to do with device orientation don't work that well on Brave. I'm not sure if it has to do with some of their privacy issues or that they're controlling privacy, whereas Chrome doesn't as much. I don't know if that's the case or not. But so I'm going to be doing this on Chrome. So if you're doing this in Brave or maybe some other browser, I've not tried it in some other more obscure browsers like Opera or something. Maybe there's might be issues there. But if I'm doing this for real, I would use a emulator. Typically, I may start off in here in a browser just for some basic proof of concept stuff. But if I'm developing this for an application, I would use an emulator. So Android Studio or Xcode for iOS devices, things like that. And I use their emulators to maneuver things around because I think that's a more reliable way to do it. I usually use a tool like Lambda tests and things like that. So just to be aware that there are some issues when doing this and you're using a browser that's a desktop-based browser because those desktop-based browsers, you're not expecting to do anything with orientation. I'm not going to pick up my laptop and just move it all around like I would my mobile device. Down here in browser compatibility, nearly almost all browsers contain it. But usually, again, it's device dependent. That's the issue that we're facing. So now, the other thing, let me just show you the demo and I'll go to the code here. But let me just refresh my screen there. So first of all, you are going to need to access maybe some of the more obscure dev tools. If you've been doing development and for web development, you access a bunch of dev tools. Probably the most common ones are up here on the top with console elements. It shows you the DOM structure, sources, network, application. Those are probably, at least for me, that's the ones I access on nearly every application that I'm working on in some shape or form. However, notice I have some other dev tools down here. Mostly the sensors one is what we're going to be looking at. And you may not have those show up automatically. Now, if you've never accessed them before that you probably have to a certain extent whenever you get an update and it says what's new and that you're looking at the console and it pops up with what's new down here. You've probably accessed this. It's called a drawer. So if you don't have it on yours, visible anyway, to open it up, you click the little vertical ellipse over here and there's a console drawer. So basically, it will open up this drawer here and you can move it to a different location, that sort of thing. But basically, this allows us to access some of those more obscure tools so we can tell it what location we're at and you can customize that. We're not going to do location-based stuff currently, but we're going to deal with this orientation one here because we're working on device-based orientation. So I can pick a certain type of orientation like portrait. I can pick, landscape left, landscape right, display up, display down, that sort of thing. So I'm looking along lengthways across the device. Now, you can also interact with these here where I can move this right here. Of course, I can always reset it. And I can actually work with the little 3D model image here where I can move it around. You'll see me do that in the demo. So now here I've just got an interface that so that we can see it happen. So I'm going to be logging. I have a start and stop button, which is going to start the watching, if I can put it that way, of the orientation, and I can stop it. And then notice this says alpha, gamma, beta, and over here alpha, beta, gamma. So I should have probably said alpha, beta, gamma. So those Greek letters. So alpha would be the compass degrees right here. Beta, front to back tilt. That's what beta is. So right now I have it portrait 0, 90 degrees straight up and down. And then gamma is left or right tilt. So let me just show you here. I'm just going to put 45 in there. And so you can see how it tilted there on the compass a little bit. And let me go back to 0. And here, let me go 45 here. And you can see, actually, let me go 90 there. Actually, nope, let me reset it and I'll just do it this way. So see how it changes gamma, alpha, all that. So anyway, so you can see the compass, the front back tilt, left and right tilt, and then I just am recording event type so you can see that. Okay, now I got this little note. It tests down multiple on mobile device with sensors. You have to have this served over SSL for encryption because, and you usually have to, I would encourage you to ask permission to access the parts of their device that give you this type of information from a privacy standpoint. Now, you're not going to see that on mine because I've already set mine up that I've already accepted all that. So now let me just start this. Okay. So I have a console log start button clicked and it shows device orientation event received. And you can see there is an alpha 0, beta 90, and then gamma 0. Now I'm going to start moving this around and you can see that this little front thing here is moving all around. I have front, back. So it's just a fun little thing where I'm spinning this 3D image here around as I'm moving the device orientation and it's recording it. You see 243 here, alpha 243.3. So it's rounding 156. 62. So you can see how that's all working. If I stop it, it'll go back to normal and nothing happens. Okay. So let's take a look at the code and kind of see how this is working. Then I'll jump back here and just refresh and show you again how this works so we can tie it all together. So if we go back here so my index page, my actual web page is pretty straightforward. Nothing fancy about it. I've got some controls here that do the start stop. I've got this one hidden. Now, whenever you're doing mobile development, just like on a desktop, you would have the difference between iOS for Mac and Windows for PC. You have to deal with differences between Android and iOS. So there are some iOS specific stuff I put in here. Now, I'm not, so if I'm on a Safari, now I'm using Chrome, so this is not going to show, but if I'm on Safari, this should show. And then I have this 3D box. So I have a div with a box and I have front and back, and you'll see how I set that up with some CSS. And then my readouts that you saw on the screen with alpha, beta, gamma event and all that. So, and then my little note. So then my styles, fairly straightforward on most of them, except I do have some shadows, some background, and then this box. This one's a key one where I'm preserving that 3D, where I'm moving it around and can transform it all around. And then if I go back to here, I have face front, face back. So I have a class of face for both of them as far as background and all that stuff. Back, I changed the background gradient a little bit, but it can rotate 180 degrees. So I'm doing some basic CSS animation. Now I'm going to be changing that programmatically with my JavaScript based on the orientation. So let's flip here. Now, if you have been watching me with these, and you should be able to get this code off either my blog posts or my repo with these. But basically, I have this really commented out for you that shows you what each of these does. So first thing I do is I grab all my pieces of the DOM right here. And then I have some state variables where if it's running or not, what's the last alpha, beta, gamma. I had the smoothing 0.2%, like it says, it means 20%. So basically, when you deal with this, I mean, this demo is not an animation demo. However, whenever you're dealing with animation, you have to worry about the user experience. And so easing and smoothing and all that stuff. So as the user spins things and all that stuff, you don't want it janky and choppy. So that's kind of what that's dealing with. I'm dealing with trying to make it nice. And that's related to this request animation frame where I'm using it to keep looping the animation. So as they are moving it, I'm trying to make that animation smooth rather than janky. Here I'm just detecting what the features are. I always recommend doing that. And then here, this has to do with the iOS permission. I kind of made a note of that over here. So I'm just getting that permission if I'm on Safari type of device. So this is that request for permission. And then I have the event handler. So I have here handle orientation. So that's every time that moves, it's going to change the device orientation. Okay. And then update from latest. That's where all the heavy lifting goes from. So I pass through whatever the latest is, and I use that smoothing to make it nice when it's rotating that box. And I'm grabbing the last alpha, beta, gamma value and doing some math there to orient it to the new alpha, beta, gamma value. And then I'm updating the context. That's updating these fields down here. This transform, this I'm changing the CSS, again, using some math to change that CSS so that I'm rotating it and transforming it nice and all that stuff. In fact, let me actually undo that console log so we can see it better. And then I have this animation loop. So I have this loop that every time it runs, it's going to run that update from latest that does the heavy lifting there. And then this request animation frame ID, again, that's so I don't have some janky animation. And start, I'm checking that it supports animation. I'm listening for that device orientation event. When that fires, I want it to call handle orientation, which was up here, where it's going to handle all that orientation of moving things around. It's going to set it to running. I'm disabling and enabling buttons as appropriately. And as long as I have an RAFID, request animation frame, it's going to just loop through. Okay. When I hit stop, it's going to change that it's running out of false, change the appropriate disabled attributes for the buttons. And I'm removing the event listener. So I'm no longer going to be listening to the device orientation. And then if I have an RAFID, I'm canceling it and returning it as null. So it stops the loop, basically, is what I'm doing. And I stop transforming and orienting that box that's on the page. So here, the start button, you'll see the console log. I check permission. Then I just run that start method that I showed you earlier. Stop button, I'm just running the stop. And then some more stuff about iOS permission. And I just have a cleanup listener on page height. So for performance reasons. So I tried to comment a lot of this, so hopefully that helps you out. But let's go back and take a look, and we'll look at the console logs over here. So I have start. Okay, so you see what it did. It start button clicked, gave me my device orientation to begin with, and I have a whole bunch of these logs that are running. The reason that's running is because of, let me get to that one. Um, actually, let me do it this way. This one right here, apply transform. I had logged that. Let me actually stop that here because I don't want to keep logging it. So I'd logged it, I had commented it out because it was just doing a bunch of logs. So I wanted to see it log. So I'll leave that in the code so you can unlog it and make sure it's logging. And then I want to show you a bunch of these others that I have some of them commented out. Okay. So let me rerun it here. Okay, so see I have raw event and then smooth. So as I move things around, it's going to be kicking it out there. Now, if you want to play with this and not have it just really, uh, muck up your logs, let me just refresh this. So I just want to make sure it stopped. You could move these console logs. I just had it here in my update from latest, but you can move them to maybe a button or something if you want to see what the latest is or have it in another location. So anyway, so I'll keep those in there if you want to mess around with it and change things around. But basically, now if we go back, here's my device orientation. Starts off at 0, 90, and 0. Reset that, and then I'm going to start moving it, and you can see it moves and changes my values and things. So it's a pretty cool feature that you have the ability to listen for that device orientation and then see what those numbers are and then trigger whatever events you may want to trigger, whether it's, like I said earlier, a web-based game or a map feature or something like that. So just another API feature allows us to do some more advanced application development. So play with this. If you have any questions, let me know. And if not, happy stepping.